All right, well, welcome everyone to It's Worth a Shot. I'm Jill Holt with Mountain Pacific, and we're thrilled to have you. I think this is, I don't know, we're in the early 20s here, 2023, I think maybe of our series. So today we will be visiting about some new resources that we've developed at Mountain Pacific. And then also we will hear from our in-house pharmacist, Kyla Nguyen, with a discussion on adverse drug events. So Mary, if you could advance the slide, please. So just a couple of housekeeping items. If you would, if you have any ideas or needs, if you could put those in the chat, we'd certainly like to incorporate your needs into our future planning for these sessions. So feel free to add those as we carry on with our conversation today. And we will continue to meet every Wednesday. All right, next slide, please.
Shall we do the polling?
Oh gosh, yes, that's right, Mary. You were going to put a polling question in. Thank you. I reminded you and now you just had to remind me. Thank you. So over the next year, and if you could just put your response in the chat box, please. Over the next year, do you plan to become an approved COVID-19 vaccine provider? Do you plan to partner with the long-term care pharmacy to supply you with vaccine and have your facility staff administer it? Do you have plans to use partnering pharmacies who provide vaccine and administer it to your folks on site? Are you not yet sure what you'll be doing over the next year? Or maybe you have another alternative plan in place. And I just received verification. This is our 22nd session. So it looks like there's still some uncertainty about what you'll be doing over the next year. That's fair. I certainly understand that. So if you could just, anything you can put into the chat box that gives us some insight into your needs and your responses will help inform us as we plan and work to make sure that as things change, that you have the resources that you need, because we all know that what we started doing for vaccine resources at the early onset of this pandemic and vaccine availability certainly has changed along the way. Okay, well, thanks for your help with that. Appreciate it. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. All right, let's cover a couple of Q&As from last week. The first question, with the new language, and I think that's the new language of up to date, should a booster be given every 4 months if eligible? For example, if 4 months have passed since someone received the first booster after the primary series, do they need a second booster? And will they continue to need one every 4 months? The answer to that question is the current recommendation is for a second booster, which can be given 4 months following the first booster for those eligible. And eligibility, as you recall, is defined by the CDC, and it's specifically for people who are moderately or severely immunocompromised or age 50 or older. There are no recommendations currently to give a booster every 4 months. Additionally, people who are ages 14 through 49, who received a Johnson & Johnson or Janssen COVID-19 vaccine for both their primary and their booster can choose to get a second booster of either Pfizer or Moderna at least 4 months after their first booster. The second booster is not required to be considered up to date for people ages 18 through 49 who got a Johnson & Johnson vaccine for their primary and first booster. So we make that mention because I know early on, Johnson & Johnson was used quite a bit, I think, in some of our long-term care settings for vaccines. So just know that there is a caveat to that booster. Of course, there's a caveat, right? It can't just be super easy. There has to be a little tangled web, but we wanted you to have that information at your fingertips. And we put these Q&A resources in the FAQ that I send out each week. So if you get to thinking later, where did I see that? You can certainly access it through those slides, which will be on our website. All right, next slide, please. Question number 2, can I get vaccinated against COVID-19 while I'm currently sick with COVID-19? So this is a change. The current recommendation is no. You should wait to be vaccinated until after you have completed your isolation period. People who have symptoms will end isolation at a different time than people who do not have symptoms. You may also consider delaying your next vaccine by 3 months from when your symptoms started or when you received a positive test if you had no symptoms. People who have had a known COVID-19 exposure should not seek vaccination until their quarantine period has ended to avoid potentially exposing healthcare personnel and others during the vaccination visit. So you may have people who have come to you or been newly admitted while at the hospital maybe, and they've had COVID, as we are now seeing an uptick in cases in our region. So it's reasonable for them to delay that vaccine booster for 3 months, certainly after they're out of their isolation period, but perhaps up to 3 months. So that's really a risk-benefit discussion between that particular resident and their healthcare provider. But that is new language and a little more flexibility built into those recommendations. Okay, next slide, please. This is just a slide with our resources for that guidance that we've provided. So next slide. So as I mentioned at the top of our meeting today, we Mountain Pacific developed a couple of new resources. I hope that you'll find them helpful. I just want to say maybe better late than never. They're here now. I wish that we had thought to get these rolled out earlier on and had the time to do so, but here we are. So the first one I want to introduce is the new COVID-19 resource. And then the second one I'll kind of show you and walk through is a checklist and a resource for infection preventionists. So next slide, please, Mary. The COVID-19 quick guide, we're calling it, is really designed for to give you at your fingertips in a single place or single location, resident resources, healthcare professional resources, visitor resources, and vaccine tracking tools. We also put, and we're going to show you this actual product here in just a minute, but we also put a quick reference code or a QR code. This is something new that we're kind of experimenting with. We're adding that or we're embedding that into our resources. And the theory is that we know that it's sometimes difficult to go to a computer, to get online and log in and get on our website to find this one-stop shop, right? So our theory is that perhaps if somebody were to scan that code into their smartphone and you had that at your pocket and you were maybe not at the bedside, but you could step away from the bedside into the hallway or a private place, you could reactivate that history on your phone, and you could go straight to the website where these resources will be housed. So we're going to keep track of those clicks and see if that's something that you guys find valuable, but we're hoping that that's just another way to make your lives a little bit easier and increase your efficiencies. Next slide, please. And then finally, with our quick COVID-19 quick guide, we are also covering areas like NHSN testing, therapeutic fact sheets, and even a little bit of CLOPY, all at your fingertips. So Mary, if you could pull up that resource and we could share it on our screen. So again, this COVID resource here can be found on our website, Mountain Pacific's website. The QR code will take you to our website where we have our nursing home tile or nursing home link for resources. And then the COVID-19 resource will be found under COVID-19 tile. So you will have to do a little clicking once you get in there, but only one other click I think will be the max. So if we kind of just talk through this, and I'm not going to read each and every one because we wouldn't have time for all of that, but you can see here, we've broken it down by categories. So initially we have resident resources. This is where you should be able to go if you have a question about new resident readmissions. What's the latest guidance? Right there will be the link to the CDC guidance specifying that particular topic. That will happen as well for resident testing and resident quarantine. We've included staff testing and the guidance and community transmission rate links and resources. Next page, Mary. We'll just kind of scroll down. Staff quarantining, masking, vaccine mandate, the attachment A, which of course was the detail for the vaccine mandate. The QSEP scenario-based training link is there. Then we have visitor resources, the latest visitation guidance, the latest on vaccine resources for patient handling and quarantining, vaccine FAQs. Let me just look at that a minute. That that COVID-19 vaccine resource, I'm wondering if that's in the wrong spot. Let's scroll down. I'm wondering if we might have to tweak that just a little bit, but it'll still be there. It might just work with us on that. Be patient while we fine tune that. We may have missed a little double check there. Declination tools. So if somebody declines a vaccine, there's a resource there. Folks that are immunocompromised, the table for vaccine boosters. You get the idea. Vaccine myths and facts, that's available on this resource. Now go ahead, Mary, you can scroll down. Training, some more training materials for COVID-19 storage and handling, some pharmacy partnership programs. And then we've put together some state-specific immunization information systems. So where you can go and who you can contact when you're looking for vaccine access. We've done the same thing with supplies. You can scooch down, Mary, another one. There you go. And then here's the NHSN resource links. All right, let's scoot to community transmission rates, and there's the QAPI, because I'm getting a little long-winded today. Let's move back to our slides, Mary. Or actually, you know what? Never mind. I see you were going to go to the IP guide. Let's just go straight there. So this is the this is really, we designed this with the new IP in mind. But for those of you that have been doing this a while, you might look at this and say, oh gosh, I better take a look at that myself. It's been a while, or I've been busy doing other things and I kind of had forgotten about that. So this, again, we've embedded a QR code here in our flyer or in our resource. This will give you some links also to things that you'll be working on and areas that you might visit frequently in your IP work. So knowing your resources, organizations that perhaps as an IP you might become familiar with or need to be familiar with. Understanding long-term care regulations. You can scroll down, Mary, please. An IP program checklist. Some ideas about as an IP, you might need to familiarize yourself with your facility's policies and procedures, some antibiotic stewardship programming, etc. Understanding outbreak investigation, training, systems access. We put some more NHSN in that resource as well. And then ICAR, if you're needing to do an ICAR, there's some links there where you can access those for your state specifically. And then also some immunization information again. And then just a place that you can keep notes if you'd like. So we'll take a look. I need to look back over that last guide real quick and make sure we have everything in the right spot. But these are on our website now. You can go to the Mountain Pacific website, go to the nursing home QI link, and then you'll find tabs in there that breaks down the different categories under the nursing home section for resources. So I hope that you find those helpful and at your fingertips and easy to use when you're busy. Just have what you need. And if we've missed something, let us know and we'll be sure to add that. We will also commit to you that we will update those links as new information changes or the link sites change. We will update those. However, if we've missed something or you see something that doesn't quite look right, you won't hurt our feelings at all. If you reach out to us, let us know. We want it to be a tool that everybody can trust and find reliable. So I think that completes this portion of the training. Kyla, do you want to take us to the next? There you go, adverse drug events. Kyla?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jill. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about adverse drug events in general. This is one of the national patient safety goals is to reduce adverse drug events. And we know that this can be a huge burden financially and patient safety wise on the healthcare system due to the number of medications that folks are taking, especially in our older population. And then I'm going to give a brief update on some therapeutics updates and drug interaction guides that have come out related mostly to Paxlovid, which is our primary treatment for COVID-19 oral therapy in non-hospitalized patients. Next slide, please. So basically just some definitions, which really can get confusing actually. Defining adverse drug events is kind of a hard thing to do. So the Institute of Medicine says that an ADE or adverse drug event is any injury resulting from medical intervention related to a drug. So this is a fairly broad term. And then we have a couple other terms kind of subsidiary and overlapping in some cases, including medication errors, which is defined as an inappropriate use of a drug that may or may not result in harm. So this is kind of those things that might be a near miss if we give the wrong dose, if we give the wrong medication, anything kind of along that continuum of medication administration and processes. And I have a nice visual on the next slide that I'll show you that kind of shows that not all medication errors are adverse events or contribute to harm to patients. And then adverse drug reactions. This is looking at things related to a drug when it's given at a normal dosage in an appropriate manner. So this would include things like allergic reactions or side effects that we would expect from a drug when we're giving them in normal doses to patients. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a huge magnitude of adverse drug events contributing to emergency department visits and hospitalizations. And patients are taking a lot of medications. 29% are taking 5 or more. And those 65 and older are our highest risk group, as I mentioned, because they, a fairly high percentage, almost a fifth, can take at least 10 medications. So as we add more medications, obviously our potential for having an adverse drug event is going to increase. Next slide, please. So this is just some prescription use data, kind of just reiterating the fact that folks are taking a lot of medicines, and 5 or more, I mean, we've got 12.8%, that's pretty high. And then if we look at that older population, we're looking at numbers even higher than that. Next slide, please. So there are some risk factors that put patients at higher risk of adverse drug events. Polypharmacy, essentially, this is just using multiple medications to treat one or more chronic conditions in patients. Pediatrics, because our drug dosing is a little bit more intricate, and these kids have a lower kind of different metabolism, I guess, of medications. And the same thing with older adults, just based on pharmacodynamic properties of your body when you're young and when you get older. And then there are some higher risk medication classes that we know. And those are on the next slide, I believe. And they are anticoagulants. And we also included their antiplatelet medications, diabetes medications, and opioids. So those are our highest risk folks, and they are contributing to a high percentage of adverse drug events that do happen. Next slide, please. So this is just from the National Drug Action Plan. This is basically the guide to, intervention strategies and how we can work to combat adverse drug events. And this is a 4-pronged approach that has been identified. Next slide, please. So kind of shifting gears now and talking about adverse drug events related to COVID medications. And I think I presented this study maybe previously in one of our presentations, but basically it was looking at several different drug interaction checking systems. And it looked to see how many of these interactions that could be clinically significant that each of them were actually detecting. And so the results were that 26% were identified by all of the tools analyzed. And I believe it was 4 different drug interaction checkers. 50% were identified by at least one, and 24% remained unidentified. So just kind of reiterating the fact that we could be missing some of these drug interactions if we're not maybe potentially checking multiple sources. Next slide, please. So next, I'm going to talk about just a couple of resources that have come out recently related to Paxlovid. There's a patient eligibility screening tool. Let's see, they say it's a tool. Yes, and it's so it's 5 pages. And basically, it starts out with how you determine if a patient is eligible to receive this therapy. And then it goes on to look at other medications they might be taking that put them at risk for drug interactions. And Mary, if I could share my screen, I can actually show the other pages of the guide so you can see. So this is what it looks like. And as you saw, I put just the first page there on the slides, but there are some drugs that we need to pay a little bit more particular attention to, including some cholesterol medicines, the statins that are prescribed fairly frequently for a lot of patients. So if they are taking lovastatin or simvastatin, it is actually contraindicated for them to get Paxlovid at the same time. So there are new recommendations that came out here that say that you need to hold the dose 12 hours prior, and then you need to hold it for the 5 days of therapy and 5 days after they have completed therapy, and then restart therapy. And the reason it's only these 2 statins is because they are metabolized more strongly through the same metabolism system as Paxlovid, and so they're a higher risk. And then if they're on another statin, they say you can consider temporary discontinuation of those medications and then restart. Hormonal contraceptives are another kind of high risk drug class with Paxlovid. And then folks with HIV treatment, there can be some precautions just to make sure that we're monitoring therapy a little bit more closely if a patient is prescribed this medication. And then the last couple pages basically have this chart, and there's actually 3 different tools that have charts similar to this. So I would recommend probably checking each one of these when you are looking at potential drug interactions. But as you can see, the red medications are absolutely contraindicated, and the yellow ones basically need to be monitored more closely or caution used by the prescriber as to whether they want to discontinue the medication temporarily if appropriate. Okay, so we can go back. Stop sharing. Oh, thank you, Jesse, for posting the link there. So I'll show you just a couple of the other, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, this is another one. So this is from Michigan Medicine. It's similar. It doesn't have the color coding, but it does have the recommendations by drug class, which is kind of handy. If that might be the way that you think about things when you're looking through drug interaction checkers. And then there's another one which is available actually online on the next slide. It's from Liverpool, and this is kind of the paper version, and it's actually got more levels of kind of precaution. It has a do not administer, do not, just absolutely do not. And then they have a potential interaction and then down to a weak interaction. And so you can look up the drug and see kind of where you were at with those interactions. And there's also an online version, which is, I believe, what Jesse just posted. Thank you. Where you can actually go online and just type in what medicines they're on if you don't have access to this guide, which is handy. And it's only for COVID drugs. But as I was kind of reviewing all this, I was thinking, man, essentially we could have for every drug, essentially, if we dove in deep enough, we could have a guide like this. And it really kind of hammers in that point that there could be a lot of things going on that we might not be actually detecting with kind of our current processes of looking at drug interactions. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think that's all I have. This is the National Action Plan that I mentioned. It's a fairly lengthy document, but you can kind of dive into each one of those 4 strategies and look a little bit more closely at those in kind of shorter bunches. And then the Institute for Safe Medication Practices has some really nice guides for high alert medications. As I mentioned, those high risk drug classes that we might want to dive in a little bit and kind of just tune into a little bit more if folks are on the high risk medications. And then medication reconciliation being a very important part of the medication process as well to help reduce adverse drug events. So any questions? Well, thank you everyone for having me back today, or at least listening to me today. And Jill, I guess I'll let you wrap us up.
All right, thank you, Kyla. Well, that concludes our 22nd. It's worth a shot. Where does the time go? My goodness. We look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.